Hey, this is Dr. Kelly Cagle. And for season 3, we're doing things a little differently because we know that a healthy and happy dad and mom starts with a healthy and happy husband and wife. So I decided to bring along my husband, Josh, as co host so we could share some real life stuff of the ways that we learn how to fight to make our marriage thrive. You are listening to season 3 of the Parenting IQ podcast, Learning to Fight. Welcome to the Parenting IQ podcast. Today we want to have a special episode because we have had a lot of requests and a lot of submissions that we've gotten over the past weeks that we want to pause and talk about the things that you want to hear that you've sent in to the studio. And so we don't have our normal outline as far as the 3 things talking on the how to fight in your marriage, but we do want to talk about what the listeners want to talk about.
Absolutely.
So that's what we're here for today. I want to encourage you right now, if you need to pause real quick, hit that submit button. If you have some requests for that we can touch on in the weeks to come, you can also do that. If you're like, man, I really wish that they would talk about X, Y, or Z, you can submit that. And just like today, we're going to talk about what you want to hear. You can do that on our website or also on Instagram at drkellycagle.com. You can head over to YouTube, our YouTube channel, and also Dr. Kelly Cagle, and then just write us a message, and we'll be sure that we talk about the things you want to hear as well. So we're going to start with the very first thing is areas of growth that we want to see in our husbands. And so I said, hey, Josh, we can do a little Q&A situation with the topics that people have submitted, and we're going to talk about them. The first one is words of affirmation. This one particular individual said, I wish I would receive more words of affirmation. Now, what are words of affirmation? Can you talk a little bit about that?
So first, I would like to say that we, as we're getting into this, we just want to, like Kelly was saying, talk to the listeners about real topics. Obviously, when we're going through these things, Kelly and I will always have to put these type of things into practice. Not that we've got it all figured out, but there's going to be many times that we can either relate or try to encourage our listeners to the best resolve or good practices, going forward. So yeah, words of affirmation, that's a good one. To me, words of affirmation are basically things that are breeding maybe confidence or acknowledgement or support, kind of like a cheerleading mentality, encouragement,
Praise.
praise, recognition. So I would kind of explain it in those realms, right? So the question is, how do we as husbands better put this into practice? And, I think as a husband, I want to first analyze, that things that when we starting to talk about it, it's like, wow, I can see how I could grow, in this. And first, what comes to mind is try to slow down, in my mind, right? With my own thoughts. I think so many of us were so captured in our own thoughts. There's just all these things going through our minds of either what is going on, what needs to happen, the tasks that we got to get done, or whatever it is, the next scheduled time we got to run kids to a practice or whatever. So I think my first encouragement to the men would be, how can we basically try to take the time to slow down, and when we get off of work, let's really try to leave it there as best we can. Obviously, there's moments where we're going to want to talk to our spouse maybe about work or be asked about work. But I think it's going to be very important for us to not let those thoughts, even if you're having a crazy, crazy day or whatever, there's not a lot that you can do at 8:00 at night to save something else that you might just have to pick up in that morning, because our family needs us. Our family needs to see our presence and not just our body presence, right? They need to see us engaged. And so I think as men, we want to make sure that we help our wives understand that we need them. They are a team. We are a team, right? And they're a big part of this team. And one thing for a listener to reach out and say, "Hey, I would
Mhm.
like to see this in my husband," I think shows me in some regards just that need for us as men to really make sure that we are providing that protection,
Yeah.
that hey, I'm going to surround you in this encouragement. I'm going to surround you in these thoughts about you, not to be
Right.
flattery or whatever, but real. Hey babe, I really and just so thankful for how you take care of the dishes, or you take care of the kids, or you take care of me,
Mhm.
in so many ways. And I think sometimes guys, we can feel a little like, hi, I don't need to say these things. They know that they're doing
Mhm.
good, or they
Yeah.
know this how I feel about them. But just because they knew one time doesn't mean that we as men don't need to continue to instill that in our wives, and also our kids. Our kids will need that words of affirmation, I think, as well. So, husbands, as we, kind of march through this next week, if you're listening, I would highly encourage all of us to be at least one thing. Just think about one thing in a day that we might could share with our wives. Hey babe, I really like how you look today.
Mhm.
Sometimes you'll tell me that you got your hair cut, or you're gonna go get your hair dyed, and you get in and I'm like the worst. I'm telling myself, okay, this is my chance to remember today that you had a haircut. I
Yep.
have to incorporate a congratulatory, or hey, I love your hair. And
Yeah.
I screw that up almost 95%
Well,
of the
because I also
time.
don't do anything
Oh
drastic,
goodness.
right?
So and I'm just like, dang it, and so that's an easy one that we
Yeah.
need to, like, hey Siri, remind me at 5 o'clock to tell my wife that I love her hair,
Yeah.
And but the reason why I use that is because it can slip our
Mhm.
mind that easy. And the same with that mentality of that encouragement or affirmation, it can slip our mind so easy. And so we need to take that effort to make sure that we honor y'all, because
Mhm.
our wives are very important. And I love you for what you do here.
Thanks, babe. I
So.
appreciate that.
Mhm. Am I
Okay.
out of the hot seat now,
Oh
or all
no.
question mic drop type stuff?
No,
Are we done?
that was great. No, we
Oh,
got more. We
okay.
got
We got
more.
more.
A few more.
All right.
So the other one was loving me in ways I feel loved.
Ooh.
And can I suggest that a little bit along the lines of words of affirmation? I put it in this order because that loving me in ways I feel loved a few years ago, and I mean several years ago, we read that book, Five Love Languages by
Oh
Gary
yeah.
Chapman,
Mhm.
and we learned of the five different ways that people feel loved. And they are words of affirmation is one of them, physical touch is one of them. So you feel loved through hugs and physical things. Another one is acts of service. So whenever you serve others, you do the dishes, you go mow the yard and those sorts of things, acts of service. Another one is gifts. So through gifts, and it doesn't have to be, $500 gift every time. It can literally be a chocolate that you grab at the office that you just a thoughtful. So gifts. And then the final one is quality time, which is just spending time together. Doesn't sometimes you don't have to be even talking as long as you're physically together. It's quality time, right?
Mhm.
So those are the five areas. And so what this other person was saying about loving me in ways I feel loved, a lot of times our tendency can be, if we're not slowed down enough, as you mentioned,
Mhm.
that we love how we love.
Sure.
And it's not always the way that the other person feels loved.
Well, that's like me and my natural process. My natural
Right.
tendencies are not to be in the same as yours,
Mhm.
right? And so, I think first, when we're getting married, or even in the dating process and shortly thereafter, we're kind of like mini detectives in a way. You
Mm-hmm.
know, what I mean by that would be when you're getting married, sometimes depending on how long you might have dated, it could be for a long time or a short period of time. There's still going to be things in life that unfold that you learn about that individual as, yeah, that marriage covenant. I think it's just designed that way. You know,
Mm-hmm.
there's something that the Lord's kind of
That's
put
why
in
we're lifelong
place
learners.
that yeah, that as you know, commit to those vows, that you start to see each other in a different light. And so that mini detective mentality is just like you said, learning each
Mm-hmm.
other, or lifelong learners, is you're constantly looking at and inquiring about our spouse. You know,
Mm-hmm.
who are you, how can I learn more about you, and just investigate. I'm interested in being interested in you, you know.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's where that whole dating mentality in a marriage comes into play, is because people do change, maybe not dramatically or like 180 degrees, but you know, they'll trend to change in different ways. And so as we date or have our date nights, it's important that we do those things, because we're kind of like setting coming back to center, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the first thing would be to try to help with a question like this on how can I, or how can my husband love me in the ways that I would like to be loved, is, you know, try to see if there's a strategy on creating a date night, you know, creating a date night to be able to get together in a just a chill, peaceful area, you know, whether it's over dinner. I'd encourage you, maybe if it's going to a coffee shop, or some situation where we're not just engaging TV, you know, that
Mm-hmm.
creates a need of conversation. And in that conversation, it could be, if there's not a need being met, you know, try to you know, create a non-threatening environment, you know, like where there's not something that I feel like if this is us that we're walking through, because you've had to, you know, we've talked about
Yeah.
these things before, and sometimes, you know, obviously you can get defensive,
Mm-hmm.
like, wait a minute, I thought I was doing that, or
Mm-hmm.
I thought, you know,
Yeah.
you like this,
Yeah.
or now you know, you can feel a little defensive,
Sure.
or maybe feel like a failure or something like that. And that's not what we want, right? We want growth. So I would encourage you to really try to create that date space.
And along those lines, babe, um, if you're kind of like, yeah, we don't really even know where to start with our conversations. I created those conversation starter cards,
Right.
and I have the date night edition specifically for that, because one of the other comments that we got was that love doesn't always end up in sex, like that it doesn't always lead to sex. That there's
What?
love,
Excuse me. I'm joking.
that there's love and in conversation in all of the ways. There is love when you are cleaning up the house, that you're showing, that you're receiving. There is love that is, sown in various ways. And so in conversation, if you're kind of like, man, I don't know how I feel loved, that is also included in those date night conversation starter cards. Some of the questions for you to stop and think as you're saying, this chill environment where there's intentionality behind it for the conversation to flow.
Hmm.
And if you don't even know, like if you're afraid of not knowing what to talk about because you always end up talking about the house projects or the kids
Yeah.
and business, because that is the tendency, even for us, you and I, that is where we will go if we don't have a plan. And I even personally made those when I was typing up those questions. You were like, how come we're not using those? I'm like,
Yeah.
calm down. It's
Yeah.
not ready yet. Because you even know that a lot of times our date nights can almost feel wasted. I don't want to say that because nothing is ever wasted, but not super fruitful in the connection that we had during the time that was undistracted.
Well, again, it takes that intentionality to go deep. It takes that intentionality in our marriage, right? We have to, even in our moments when we're talking about these things, or when we're getting ready to talk to you guys about, you know, life. One thing that I appreciate when you've asked me to come help in this thing is it helps me just make sure that we're staying focused on
Mm-hmm.
us in
Mm-hmm.
more than what we maybe would
Right.
any other time, right? We
Mm-hmm.
tend to go on our date nights, once or twice a month, and here we are doing these things every week. And so
Mm-hmm.
I'm enjoying at least hearing some of the things from our listeners, hoping that we can help just be a vessel that's
Yeah.
being used
But you
for
know
other
what's
people.
super funny is that even just yesterday we were telling some friends this, that we wish that there were camera people here in our studio before we hit the record button.
Yeah.
As we are sitting here dissecting what we're going to talk about and creating a plan. If you only saw those first few 5 or 6 episodes. I mean, we were arguing, we were
Yeah.
fighting, we were
Well, that
because
I will say.
we didn't know how to fight in this environment yet.
Sure. Well, and keep these questions coming because today is a lot easier for for us than to sit here and wrestle with what's on our heart. And ultimately, it's more just because we're in a walk with other marriages. We are all the same. We're all wanting to have a good marriage. There's not someone that ever goes into marriage saying, "Yeah, I hope this sucker
Mhm.
ends," or that I hope we're going to get in this bad marriage. So going back to this, these questions though, as a man, ladies, we tend to kind of just get in our own world, and I have to appreciate the ladies so much for that family mindset. And I do think that men grab hold of that. There's some guys that are probably even more natural. I'm one that
So let me tell you the next one. The next submission was,
I don't know if I answered this second one, did I?
well, I don't know. Do you have more to say?
Well, I'm
Because it
trying to
goes
say it. You
along.
cut me off. We're about to fight.
Okay, then continue.
Well, I just want to make sure that listener really understands that, us as men, we want to love you well. Okay. Sometimes we just need help. We're not the greatest hearers, listeners. Our ears don't work maybe as easy as is the ladies. And so I would hope that we can get some patience, but when we think about love, I always want to encourage everyone, because that word is so broad, to go into First Corinthians chapter, I think it's
13.
13, where it talks about and it defines love as patience and kindness and gentleness and faithfulness and self-control, and all the different types of things that it talks about with love there is really what we are expressing, right? So when we're being kind, we're being loving. When we're being patient, we're being loving. When we're
Mhm.
being gentle, we're being loving. When we're being faithful, we're being loving. You see, when we have self-control, we're being loving, and we're practicing those things. And so as a man, help help uh help draw him in, and you might flatter him a little bit, and then really just get in a place where you can share your heart with him. And I believe that he will listen, if he knows that it's genuine, and you're really after the marriage, and it's not just something to, you know,
Mhm.
hey, fix this type of
Yeah.
thought.
Mhm. Oh,
All right.
that's really
So
good.
sorry.
Well, what I wanted to say is that you were transitioning into your, I think you were going to say that you're task oriented, and a lot of times that can,
Hmm.
but you're saying maybe not everybody is that way, because another one was talking about prioritizing me over the kids. And like, as far as the wife
Sure.
said that the husband
Yeah, she
prioritizes the
comes
kids.
second or
Yes.
third.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get it. And in life, I think we all wish sometimes we had more time. And not that that's an excuse. What I think that we just have to make sure that we do is manage it properly or well. And so putting you as a spouse first is something that we need to make sure we stay focused on.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I would want to always encourage ladies, so when you think about the when Jesus is talking about the marriages, and he talks about husbands loving their wives as Christ loves the church, and wives love their husbands, basically with submit, the husbands and all this. Sometimes what you see is that as Christ loved the church, that we are kind of like acting as Christ, right? So many times we're not perfect,
Mhm.
and we can be put in this place of, the desire, I think, from a woman is you want us to just knock it dead in our
Mhm.
lives, whether it's in our career, as a father, as a husband. I think there's just so much desire from a woman to have just this amazing man. I think y'all have these awesome visions or thoughts of what a man is, and we need to hear and learn what those things are.
Mhm.
But so many times we as men we're fighting against maybe our what we see as our weaknesses, or what we can see as where we might have failed, or whatever,
Mhm. Mhm.
and we're warring at those things in our minds, and so help not let that perfection or that
Expectation.
expectation be the driving force. Help us through that patience and that forgiveness, because we're gonna mess up. But whenever I know that you have my back when I've made a mistake, or screwed up, and you're still there for me, I want to get better.
Mhm.
It's weird. It's just
Mhm.
this desire to want to reconcile.
Mhm.
And so, in all of this stuff that we're going through, we definitely want to make sure that we, as husbands, are leading well,
Mhm.
but I think putting you first is a must. um so the best way I can think of is how do we do that daily, not
Mhm.
once a month. And so whether that's you're waking up early together, and maybe you spend the first 20-30 minutes of your day trying to get on the same page, if your day is that packed,
Mhm.
right? Because everybody's schedules are
Yeah.
so different nowadays. But really trying to just spend, 15-20 minutes of just some intentional time.
And that for us happens a lot of times whenever you get home from work. And my love language that we briefly talked about earlier is quality time. And so you know that when you get home that I need that time. And although we've shared several times just in a joking fashion that your love language is physical touch, you actually have two that are really high, and it's physical touch and words of affirmation.
Right.
And what's important for the two of us is when you first walk in the door, I basically have shut my computer off, walked out of the office because I work from home. Same thing, like we both are transitioning with the very first point that you made about this. Now I'm home. Here's my time to be present and intentional. We do spend the first 15-20 minutes a lot of times while we're cooking dinner together, because again we always bring up food, and that's has been a big learning curve for us this past couple of years,
Hmm.
figuring out how to make that happen. And you do help me in the kitchen, and so that is quality time, and it gives us the time to chat, which always ends up in words of affirmation for me, because we know um we know this about ourselves, that this is how we tick. And so if the kids come in and they're, hey, dad, mom, blah, 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 we say, hold on, boys, we are talking. Give us just a minute.
Right.
And
Well,
and we really communicate that with them to
yeah.
wait.
Yeah, I think some, putting you first can look like that in quality time. I think putting you first, it could also look like, hey, where is the respect? Like sometimes is the husband more respectful of the kids
Mm-hmm.
and more snappy with the wife?
Mm-hmm. Or
Or
vice
and
versa.
that could be vice versa. When maybe, definitely that could be an aspect,
Mm-hmm.
because marriage is very colorful. And so I think we just want to make sure that with this question, that husbands, that we understand that our choices, whether we are making choices or not making choices, I heard this before, whether we're making choices or not making choices are powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And so we need to make sure that we're choosing you
Mm-hmm.
as a spouse first, because that is the order. And our kids, they'll notice. And maybe we're getting it wrong for a little bit of time,
Mhm.
but if you were to take that attitude right before, a lot of times before I get into the house, before I open the door, I'll try to, really and truthfully, I try to close my eyes real quick, take a good deep breath, and then come in. And the mentality there is almost hitting this reset button
Mhm.
of, hey, what I've had going on in the day, I don't need to bring home into the family, especially if I know I'm tense or something like
Mhm.
that. I don't need to bring it home into the family. We'll get there. We'll talk about it at some point, but now it's family time.
Yeah.
And family time starts with the wife first, because you wouldn't be a family without the wife, right? And so I think we as men need to make sure that we're holding that line. Okay.
That's good. Um, Balancing, you kind of touched on it a little bit. That's why I'm kind of like trying to figure out how to word this, but balancing life altogether. So work, house chores, parenthood, marriage, and self-care.
Yeah, I wish, man, constantly going around trying to figure out ways to make
We
things
really
better.
do. We talk about this all the time.
But what comes to my mind first when you ask or when you say that would be routine. Try to establish a healthy routine. And not, I wish I had a healthier routine, but I do try to get up very early in the morning on my own time and spend at least an hour, hour and a half in the mornings to myself, whether it's in prayer or, in the word, thinking about the day, things like that, trying to get things put together. But it first starts in that routine. I think someone that's got a routine,
Mhm.
a healthy routine, is someone that's going to have a better chance hitting your goals. So and maybe you haven't ever really put together goals. I don't have goals for everything, but I do know that daily grind, or that daily consistency, is kind of
Mhm.
like when you listen to people, at the first of the year start working
Yeah.
out in the
Yeah.
gyms. They always say that the gyms are packed in January, and then they're not as full in February, and then
Mhm.
it kind of goes backwards, because the intentional things are good, but then
Mhm.
it wears on you a little
Mhm.
bit. So you have to fight for those routines. Decide what you really, really think is important, that makes sense in your family. Break it down, whether it's by the task or by the time that you have involved, and try to be and let your spouse know, what your routines maybe look like compared to hers,
Mhm.
so that you guys would at least understand what each other's agendas are, and how does that overlay between your marriage, and then which ones do we need to make sure we're holding each other accountable to.
Mhm. Well, I have something super exciting to say, and I can only share little bits here and there because it's still in the works. But along the lines of healthy routines, we have two very special things coming with at Dr. Kelly Cagle that I cannot wait to share more about with you guys, because I think that it's going to help you, mom. This is only for mom. So if dad, you're listening, I'm sorry, but make sure that you are helping your wife value this, these two things a lot, because they're going to be very helpful to figure out this balance. This is so key in motherhood. It's
Hmm.
so important. And you're answering that question, but I also want to jump in that with the healthy routine, that is the only way that, I mean, like, obviously aside from Jesus and him being included in your routine, like him being the priority in your routine, is the only way that you can be a sane person.
Well, I mean, we at the end of the day, when we're going through life, and everything's said and done, a lot of people will talk about on their deathbed, what is it that they talk about? And so the biggest thing that they say is that people wish they had more time that they spent intentionally with their family, or whatever it might have been,
Mm-hmm.
but it was a lot more time. And then when we die, we all give an account based on what? It's based on the time that we spent here. And so I think about a stat. We're about to go to a Cowboy game, and I think about a stat that was talked about with Tony Evans, and I believe he said something to the effect that when the ball is hiked of actually football playing time, people hammering each other out, trying to get to the quarterback, whatever, is centered around. It's about 28 minutes, I believe, is what he said as the average
The entire
time
game.
for the entire game. Well, this entire game will revolve around 3.5, maybe 4 hours, more
It's
or less, and
crazy.
then you tailgate or whatever you might end up doing. Could be a half a day or
It's
longer,
crazy.
and you think about that for 28 minutes of actual action. And I love football, but I'm just sharing with you how easy it is to get distracted. Whether these routines that we talk about. I listened to Zig Ziglar a while back, and he said you grab a healthy routine and you have to hold on to it for dear life because it's so hard or it's so easy to break. And what we want to make sure that we're trying to do for all of us in our marriages is we want healthy marriages. So we've got to understand, how do we manage our time,
Hmm.
and how do we apply the time we have towards our spouse first, and then our kids, and then ourselves. We got to also incorporate that. But I
Hey,
think
I have another question.
what?
How do we not make everything about sex? And this is for you.
Oh
No, I
no.
mean like from a wife talking. How can I be loved aside from everything always being sexual?
I,
Whatever.
There's not an answer there. Okay. No, I'm joking. So, I'm just trying to help the guys here. Okay. The just ladies, we're not pieces of meat. Okay. So our bodies, they're just, you're just going to have to calm down. I'm joking. I'm joking. But, no, I think to answer that would be, um, tough, because guys, obviously we that's a great thing. But I think it's just more us being aware, trying to set a
What
tone.
are some ways that you do that? Like that you show me love when the kids are around? Because obviously we're not going to have kids with kids or sex with the kids around. What are some ways?
You're talking about like, on like us hugging each other,
Yeah.
kissing.
Yeah.
Well, I think sometimes it is good to just, do that. That's a tough question. Okay, I'm just telling you, it's not easy. Because I think with a guy, it obviously, if you're going to start kissing on each other in the bedroom when you're going to bed, then that's you got to figure out how you're, if that's not the intent, you
But
got to
that's
figure
kind
out
of
how to break
obvious.
that
But
up.
I'm just talking about in everyday moments, just
Okay.
outside of that. You can walk by and just like rub my shoulders, or we can hold hands when we're out in public. You can, just like what we're talking about with the love languages. There are different ways in addition to the physical touch one,
Hmm.
right? So the physical touch is only one of the ways to feel loved. And whenever you are showing love to your spouse, you're just not expecting payment. And what I mean by that is like sex. You're like,
Sure. No, I'm just messing a little bit here. As far as that goes, I do think that we got to make sure as men that we are balancing that well.
mm-hmm,
Okay, that we do, understand the differences between the male
yeah,
female, operation and mentalities there, right? Is that it's not always about that. It is still good to have a date night and not always feel like that has to be
mm-hmm,
the thing that closes it off. Sometimes I agree, but I'm just saying, if in the daily mentalities, if the guy doesn't grab hold of that, if
yeah,
it's something that's never talked about,
mm-hmm.
then it
Which we
then
talked about in a couple episodes ago, the importance of even having these conversations about sex.
yeah, because if it's not really talked about, then the guy's just natural. I'm just trying to
Mm-hmm.
talk about the natural
Yeah.
mentality. Is he doesn't just always all of a sudden say, oh wait, no, let's not
Well, and
do
if
that.
the girl hasn't communicated that to the husband either, like, hey, can we just hold hands? And then the guy's already not thinking like, oh, this holding hands is going to
Yeah,
lead to something else. Like she wants me tonight. No, it's like sometimes I just want to hold your hand.
right.
Sometimes I just want you to rub my feet.
Yeah.
Sometimes I just want you to, play with my hair and not lead to something else.
Hmm. And again, if we're having a healthy sex life, and I think it makes those type of conversations go
Yeah.
easier, really,
Mm-hmm.
because I think that that really, that healthy sex life gives the guy that assurance that, hey,
There's an issue
yeah,
here. We can talk about this.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, let's have the conversation,
Mm-hmm.
and we've had to have this conversation before,
Mm-hmm.
okay? Because that is a very interesting and tough question,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
okay?
And you know why, as we wrap this up, we say it every week. We are two different people, right?
Mm-hmm.
We are two different people, but we're on the same team. And so, as we talk about these things, you have your thoughts, I've got my thoughts, you have your desires, you have the ways that you feel loved, I've got mine. And so, if we're not in a place where we are bringing these things to each other's attention, then we're not fighting in a healthy way. If we are avoiding these conversations because we are wanting to avoid arguments, then you are not fighting for each other. You're not fighting for your marriage, because what's going to happen? The lid is going to explode one day. It's going to come off, and it's not going to be good, because then it's going to be damaging, to the
Mm-hmm.
relationship. So make sure that you are communicating about these things. You're learning to fight throughout this season. As Josh mentioned, we don't have this figured out, but we have an outline of all these topics that we want to talk about. But these are things that we have seen that are important in our life. So if you've got something that you haven't heard yet, that you're like, man, I really wish they would talk about this, remember that you can submit those to us. And we would love to hear that, because we don't want to just talk about the things that we see in our marriage, because we are just two people in a household with three sons. We're boy parents. It could be that it's something else in your household. So make sure that you are subscribed to the Parenting IQ podcast, that you go to our website, drkellycagle.com, to grab those conversation starter cards for date nights, for you to have those deep conversations. And that if you've got anything else you want to talk about, that you send us our way, so we can have another chit chat about the things that you want to hear about. So we will see you next week, so we can continue to learning to fight.